The world tasted of ash and fear. A metallic tang clung to the back of his throat, a constant reminder of the mangled birdcage that had moments ago been his cockpit. The sun, a malevolent eye peering through the tattered silk of his parachute, seemed determined to sear the memory of the crash into his retinas. Below, the forest floor rushed up to meet him, a chaotic tapestry of green and brown, promising pain and the unknown. He braced himself, a silent prayer forming on his lips, a desperate plea lost in the wind's mournful song. The impact stole his breath. A jolt of white-hot agony ripped through his leg, and he crumpled to the earth, the parachute collapsing around him like a shroud. For a moment, there was only the pounding of his heart, a frantic drumbeat against the silence of the woods. Then the pace sharpened, demanding attention. He gasped, trying to orient himself, to understand the extent of the damage. Above, the sky was a cruel blue, indifferent to his plight. The air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, felt heavy, suffocating. He was alone, utterly, terrifyingly alone. He forced himself to move, to push through the waves of nausea and pain. His hand, trembling, found the cold steel of his service pistol. A small comfort, a fragile shield against the shadows that danced at the edge of his vision. He scanned the trees, his senses straining to detect any sign of movement, any hint of a threat. The forest held its breath, watching him, waiting. The silence was a living thing, pressing in on him, amplifying the frantic rhythm of his heart. He was a trespasser here, an unwelcome guest in a land ruled by fear and uncertainty. The memory of her face, a beacon in the encroaching darkness, flickered in his mind. Clara, her smile, the way her eyes crinkled at the corners when she laughed, the soft touch of her head in his. He clung to that image, a lifeline in the swirling chaos. He had promised her he would come back. He had sworn he would see her again. That promise, that vow, was all that kept him from succumbing to despair. He would survive. He had to, for her. The worn leather of the photograph warmed against his skin. He traced the outline of her face, the delicate curve of her jaw, the gentle slope of her nose. It was a picture taken on a summer afternoon in a field of wildflowers. She was laughing, her hair catching the sunlight, her eyes sparkling with joy. He remembered the scent of the flowers, the warmth of the sun on his skin, the sound of her laughter echoing in the air. It seemed like a lifetime ago, a distant dream from a world that no longer existed. He met her at a dance, a USO event held in his hometown before he shipped out. He was awkward, tongue-tied, overwhelmed by her beauty. She, however, seemed to see something in him, something beneath the uniform and the fear. She drew him out, coaxed him into conversation, made him laugh. They danced until the music stopped, their hands lingering a moment too long as they parted. He knew in that instant that his life had changed forever. Their courtship was brief, a whirlwind of stolen moments and whispered promises. Walks in the park, picnics by the river, late-night talks under the stars. He told her about his dreams, his fears, his hopes for the future. She listened patiently, offering words of encouragement and support. She understood him in a way that no one else ever had. He fell in love with her quickly, deeply, irrevocably. He remembered the day he proposed. He had taken her to the highest point in town, a lookout that offered a panoramic view of the valley. He had practiced his speech 100 times, but when he finally knelt before her, the words seemed to vanish from his mind. He simply held out the ring, a simple band of gold, and looked into her eyes. She understood. Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded, her voice a choked whisper. Yes, she said. Yes, 1,000 times yes. The wedding was small, intimate, filled with love and laughter. They danced their first dance to a song he couldn't quite recall now. His arms wrapped tight around her, her head resting on his chest. He remembered the feel of her hand in his, the warmth of her breath on his neck, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air. It was the happiest day of his life, a memory he would carry with him always, a beacon of hope in the darkest of times. He had to get back to her. He would get back to her. The farmhouse offered a deceptive tranquility. The distant rumble, barely audible at first, grew with menacing speed. He knew what it was, a patrol. He cursed the delay with the girl, the need to cauterize the wound, the desperate hope for rest. Now that hope was a cruel joke. He pushed Elodie towards the root sower, a dark, damp maw in the earth behind the house. "Stay quiet, no matter what you hear." His voice was a harsh whisper, urgency stripping away any gentleness. He shoved the heavy wooden door shut, the metallic clang echoing in the confined space. Then he turned, his gaze sweeping the small, cluttered kitchen. No time. He grabbed the Mauser, the cold steel of familiar comfort in his trembling hand. It slipped out the back door, melting into the overgrown orchard. The soldiers arrived with the predictable brutality of an occupying force. Boots crunched on gravel, shouts shattered the afternoon stillness, and the air filled with the metallic tang of fear. He watched from the shadowed depths of the orchard, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, as they ransacked the house, their guttural commands a chilling counterpoint to the terrified whimpers he could hear from within. He saw them drag Madame Dubois from the house, her face streaked with tears, her frail body shaking. They demanded to know where he was, their questions punctuated with slaps that echoed in the courtyard. He gripped the Mauser tighter, his knuckles white, the urge to intervene a burning fire in his gut. But he knew he couldn't. Not yet. Not if he wanted to protect Elodie. The interrogation escalated. He watched, helpless, as they pushed Madame Dubois to the ground, their threats growing more violent. The leader, a hulking brute with a cruel smile, pointed his pistol at her head. That was it. He couldn't watch anymore. He burst from the orchard, a primey scream tearing from his throat. The Mauser barks, the shot echoing across the farmyard. The leader crumpled, the pistol falling from his lifeless hand. Chaos erupted. Soldiers scattered, firing wildly in his direction. He moved like a phantom, weaving through the trees, returning fire with deadly accuracy. He was a whirlwind of fury and desperation, fueled by adrenaline and a burning need to protect the innocent. But he was outnumbered. He felt a searing pain in his leg as a bullet tore through his flesh. He stumbled, falling to the ground, the Mauser slipping from his grasp. He looked up to see a soldier looming over him, his face contorted with rage. He closed his eyes, bracing for the end. Then a high-pitched scream pierced the air. Elodie, she had disobeyed him. She had come out of the cellar. He opened his eyes and saw her standing there, a small, defiant figure, her face pale but resolute. The soldier hesitated, his gaze shifting from him to the girl. That hesitation was all he needed. He lunged, tackling the soldier to the ground. A brutal struggle ensued, a desperate fight for survival. He managed to disarm the soldier, but not before taking another blow to the head. He felt himself fading, the world blurring around him. He saw Elodie watching him, her eyes wide with terror. He had failed. He had put her in even greater danger. The silence in the study is thick, heavy with unspoken grief. Thomas sits in the worn leather chair, the fire casting flickering shadows on his face. A scent of old books and pipe tobacco hangs in the air, a comforting aroma that does little to soothe the ache in his heart. He hasn't spoken about that day in decades. Not really. He's told the sanitized version, a heroic tale of a downed pilot who fought bravely against overwhelming odds. But he's never spoken about the fear, the guilt, the helplessness. He's never spoken about Elodie. He raises the glass of scotch to his lips, the amber liquid burning a familiar path down his throat. He needs the burn, the momentary distraction from the memory who had clawed at him. He sees her face, so clear, so vibrant, as if it were yesterday. He remembers the feel of her small-handed his, the sound of her laughter, the way her eyes lit up when he told her stories of the sky. He failed her. That truth is a constant companion, a shadow that follows him everywhere. He saved her life, yes, but at what cost? He knows in his heart that she never truly recovered from that day. The war had taken something from her, something precious and irreplaceable. He tried to stay in touch, writing letters, sending gifts. But the distance, both physical and emotional, grew with each passing year. He visited her once, years later, after the war. She was polite, distant, a stranger in a familiar face. He saw the haunted look in her eyes, the unspoken question that hung between them. He knew then that he could never truly make amends. He closes his eyes, the image of Elodie fading into the darkness behind his eyelids. He sees instead the faces of the men he killed, the soldiers he fought, the lives he took. He was a soldier, doing his duty, fighting for his country. But the blood is still on his hands. He opens his eyes and looks at the photograph on the mantelpiece. A younger version of himself, handsome and confident, standing proudly in his flight suit. He barely recognizes that man. He was a hero then, a symbol of hope. Now he's just an old man, haunted by ghosts. A man who carries the weight of his past like a leaden cloak. A man who knows that some wounds never truly heal. He finishes his scotch in one gulp, the burn doing little to warm the chill that has settled deep within his bones. The forest held its breath. Sunlight, fractured by the canopy, painted shifting patterns on the mossy ground. Elias, breathing shallowly, stared at the woman before him. Her eyes, the same startling blue as the sky he yearned to fly in again, held a universe of untold stories. He saw not an enemy, but a reflection of his own weariness, his own longing for peace. The Luger felt heavy in his hand. An unwanted extension of a war he was beginning to understand was devoid of heroes. Why? He finally rasped, the word catching in his throat. She didn't flinch. Because the killing has to stop. On both sides. Her voice was soft, yet resonated with an unwavering conviction that silenced the forest around them. She gestured towards the hidden entrance to the cave. My husband, he was a doctor. He believed in healing, not hurting. He helped anyone, regardless of their uniform. Elias lowered the Luger, the metal suddenly feeling like ice against his skin. He remembered the faces of the men he'd flown with, the camaraderie, a shared fear and exhilaration. But he also remembered the faces of the villagers below, the terror in their eyes as the bomb fell. The black and white morality of war was dissolving, replaced by shades of gray, as complex and impenetrable as the forest itself. He followed her into the cave. The air inside was cool and damp, carrying the scent of earth and something medicinal. Deeper in, huddled around a flickering oil lamp, were children. Their faces were gaunt, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and hope. He recognized the small blonde boy he had seen earlier. The woman knelt, smoothing his hair. They are orphans, she said quietly. Victims of the war. We try to protect them. The weight of his actions, the potential consequences of his mission crashed down on him. These were not nameless enemies, but human beings caught in the same brutal trap. He saw the ghost of his own childhood reflected in his faces, a life torn apart by forces beyond their control. Days bled into weeks. Elias helped the woman, whose name was Anya, tend to the children. He learned to forage for food, to build fires without smoke, to speak in whispers that wouldn't betray their location. He shared stories of his life before the war, of flying, of his family. He discovered a part of himself he had almost forgotten, a capacity for tenderness and compassion that had been buried beneath layers of duty and fear. The Luger remained untouched, a silent testament to a past he was slowly shedding. One evening, huddled around the fire, Anya spoke. The war, it will end eventually, but the scars, they will remain for generations. She looked at him, her blue eyes filled with a profound sadness. What kind of world will we leave for these children? Elias had no answer. He only knew that he couldn't go back. He couldn't return to a world that demanded blind obedience, that glorified violence. He had seen too much, felt too much. He was no longer the same man who had crashed into this forest. Months later, as the snow began to melt, they heard the distant rumble of tanks. The war was moving closer. Anya looked at Elias, her face etched with worry. They will find us, she said. You must go. Take the children. Find somewhere safe. Elias knew she was right. He couldn't protect them here. He had to take them away, to find a place where they could rebuild their lives, where they could learn to trust again. He gathered the children, his heart heavy with a mixture of fear and determination. He looked back at Anya, her silhouette framed in the entrance of the cave. Thank you, he whispered. She smiled, a sad, knowing smile. Fly high, Elias, and remember us. He turned and led the children into the forest, towards an uncertain future. The silent wings of his past had carried into this place. Now he would use his own 2 feet to guide these children towards a new dawn. The war may have stolen their innocence, but it would not steal their hope. He would make sure of it. He would be their pilot now, navigating them through the treacherous landscape of a world scarred by conflict, towards a horizon where peace might finally take flight. The fate of these children, and perhaps his own redemption, depended on it.